Welcome to the Homefront Podcast, hosted by me, Becca Bookman. The Homefront Podcast aims to introduce you to the people, initiatives, and ideas shaping Israel from within. Food has played a central role in the civilian response to war. Food is comforting, it's nourishing, and it's a way so many of us show love. On today's episode, I'm joined by Aliya Fastman, co-founder of Citrus and Salt and also Citizen Kitchen. They have served over 65,000 meals in the last 9 months, and if anyone is about food, it's her. It's my pleasure to say, welcome to the show, Aliya.
Hi, thanks for having me.
We kick off every episode asking our guests, how is your Zionism doing today?
I was even thinking about it on the way here. Behind me, there was two older men talking heavily about religion, one secular and one religious man wrapping tefillin. I was like, wow, what a nice thing that there can be two people openly discussing religion in a safe environment and that they don't have to agree to be able to really learn from one another. So I'm really just appreciating the fact that I can live here, that there's so much diversity here, and that I'm able to help the country and the people that I love.
So we've had a lot of people on this show who have done many different things, and there's always food at some point in their story about what they've been up to during the war. And your story is entirely about food. So take us back to October 7th or where the story starts for you.
So in terms of our volunteer initiative, Citizens Kitchen, we started the WhatsApp group to be able to collect volunteers and money on October 8th. Because on the 7th in the morning, we woke up, along with everybody else to the rockets, really thinking it was another, semi-normal day. And then by the afternoon, we realized that wasn't the case. So because me and my sister are both type O, we went to evacuees to donate blood. And honestly, it was like the first time I ever saw Israelis stand in line so well. And we were standing there, and businesses like Abu Rafia were bringing food, and it was really a joint effort. And still people were really unsure of what was going on. By the 8th, we were driving for Adopt a Savta to be able to pass out food to elderly and Holocaust survivors. But then I realized that we really had more to offer because we're chefs. We had a space and we had a network already set up. So by the evening of the 8th, we created a WhatsApp group, posted it to our socials. A lot of people shared it, and a lot of people wanted to help. So by the morning of the 9th, when we started cooking at 9 a.m., we had raised over $3,000 overnight and had plenty of volunteers to come help us. Now, the initial volunteering was just me passing out my credit cards, sending people to different stores, and then bidding them to give them money. And that first day, we didn't know where we were sending the food. So it was like, is this virtue signaling? Do people even need the food? Turns out we found places to send it. And then the next day on the 10th, we were offered a bigger kitchen with our friends who own the Mashbil bar. So we started operating out of there for the next 3 weeks. There, we must have produced about 15,000 meals, maybe 20. And so we were really pumping out hundreds and hundreds a day. And then more of a clear network and system arose. So we had a network of drivers. We had chefs who came in. We had the packing people. We had the ordering people. We had this wonderful man from Russia who started bringing us kilos of kosher meat. Everything sort of fell into place, and I started organizing all the different parts so it became easier. And now, thank God, 9 months later, we're much more streamlined. But then it was really chaotic, and there was a lot of trauma around it too. So a lot of people were just showing up to have a place to be and a place to help. So we had some community events, Shabbat dinners, some free English therapy. Psychotherapists came in to try to work with the community as well, because there's a lot of confusion also amongst immigrants because they don't necessarily have family here. They don't speak the language. So where was this place? Where was their place in the war and in the effort to be able to give back and help? Now, a lot of Olim did leave. But I really dug in like a mole rat. I was like, I will not leave. Partially because I wanted to help. I wanted to really be like, okay, if I say I'm an Israeli, I'm here. It's not just for falafel and sunshine. It's very much for the good and the bad, like in a marriage. So I really wanted to be able to give back. And then also because my son is on the spectrum and he's in a wonderful special school, I was like, there's no way that Hamas is going to keep him from therapy. So thank God he was only out a couple of weeks. We put him back in under rocket fire. They built a new shelter, and we just kept cooking.
So the first week of the war, you're developing a new initiative. You're basically pivoting a business that you already had, and you're dealing with a lot in your family life.
Yeah. So we signed on our new big, beautiful studio on October 4th. So then we had 2 leases for the first 2 months. And also my children were out of school, but because my husband is a psychiatric nurse, they had to come with me to the war kitchen. So I had a bunch of volunteers watching them. And I assigned each one to pick certain ones up to run them to the bomb shelter, which was 2 blocks away. So it was like, had to be very carefully organized.
And the 2 leases that you signed, so tell us a little bit the business that you have and why you have these leases. You had certain dreams before October 7th hit, and what were those and how did they change?
I founded Citrus and Salt, which is a cooking studio, in 2016 while I was doing my master's degree in conflict resolution and mediation. And then I started working in PR, which I really liked, and there was a great team, but I built Citrus and Salt, teaching cooking and doing different culinary events on nights and weekends. And then I transitioned, what year? Like 2022, to doing full-time, and my sister also started doing it full-time, and we had a brick-and-mortar studio in Florentine, but we outgrew it because the business is really successful and we love it. So we wanted to move to a better studio. So we signed on that, feeling really optimistic because we had a lot of work lined up. And then there was going to be a little bit of an overlap in the leases, but that's what happens. Sometimes you have to cut your losses. And then suddenly the war hit and we had 2, and no work. A lot of people started writing me for refunds, even on the 7th, which I thought was rude. So I told them they should donate it to our war kitchen.
So
we don't have time to, muck around.
So you have all of that unfold on October 7th, like you said, and then you basically set up this supply chain. You are finding volunteers and you're finding where to put the food. So how are you finding all these different people that you need, both on the operation side and then on the receiving side?
Well, Israelis are very helpful, and we love WhatsApp. So people just started contacting each other and seeing how they could help and where they could be of service. And just like a puzzle, all the puzzle pieces came together. I also am really good at being bossy. So you just assign people new roles based on their strengths, and either they rise to the challenge or they don't.
So that's how you put together your volunteers. And in terms of where the food is going, where is it going, and how are you finding those people?
So in the beginning, it was much more of an acute need because there wasn't enough food. There's a lot of reservists showing up and all that, and displaced people. So there was more of an acute need to just feed people. So people would get in touch with us. In the beginning, there was more like calling out for, like, we have an Israeli chef that we partnered with also, Alon, starting from the very first day. And he started calling his contacts. And then we started becoming more known because there was like a handful of kitchens doing this kind of stuff. So we would get contacted by units to send food. Really, it's by request because I don't want any food to get thrown away. We don't just send food. It's ordered. And, if there's any vegetarians or gluten-free or anything, we accommodate that as well. And then we send the food out based on a specific agreed upon time and such. So we make sure it's actually used.
So you're very values-driven, not to be wasteful, for things to work well, to be making an impact.
Well, there's no point doing something if you're not going to do it well.
Fair enough.
I do not have time for inefficiency.
So in terms of doing things well, when it comes to food, you're doing food very well. But why has food been so central in the civilian war response?
Because we're not just feeding them, because you can literally survive off tuna cans and corn. But we're sending comfort and nourishment through food. We write well wishes on the boxes. We send videos. We send letters from around the world, from our volunteers. So it's more than just the actual food, which is, of course, delicious, but it's also saying, if you have our backs, we have your stomachs. And if they're fighting, then we're still working. We're not just taking for granted people's sacrifices. So even if it's just coming together a couple times a week at this point, showing intention that these aren't regular times and that we want to help as much as we can.
So is that partially why you've kept going for as long as you have?
Well, in the beginning of the war, I said we were going to keep going throughout the war, but I didn't imagine it was going to last 9 months. But, a commitment is a commitment.
That's strong.
I'm very stubborn. Also, to be fair, like the money hasn't run out, right? Because people are still willing to donate and they're still willing to show up. Okay, so it's not a one-person effort.
And people showing up, have you had people showing up consistently for 9 months, or is it new people? Who are these people that are showing up for you?
So in the beginning with locals, nobody really had a job for a while. So we had consistent locals every day. We were doing Shabbat dinners. Everybody had a role. Like, it was really a wonderful community. As people started going back to work, then we took on more like volunteer delegations through tour groups and such, and they help sponsor meals as well. And so that's more of like a one-off time, but we have like me and my sister and Chef Alon and other consistent volunteers that help us kind of shape the kitchen, and also we have interns.
And for the length of time that you've been doing this, the whole 9 months, how have things either shifted, and how do you see them continuing to shift as the war develops?
It was a lot more frantic in the beginning. Now it's more streamlined and smooth, and we build the schedule around our cooking classes. In the beginning, we canceled all business for like months.
Wow. How you got to that decision? Because there weren't tourists, or how did you get there?
It just felt like it wasn't the time to do joyful things, and it was better to volunteer. And then also with the donations and the volunteering coming in, we were able to pay for the space, pay for the food, and just kind of focus on that mission. And now we're trying to do both things in tandem.
And as things develop in the north, is there any impact on you at this point, or one that you're expecting?
So we've been sending food to the north the whole time. We've even had drivers just drive up to the Golan, We're sending different missions of food and videos and letters to the front lines. That's actually where the food is that we're cooking this week is going. So definitely our thoughts are up there. And my sister and I were actually discussing how to weather the financial storm of another war. And I was like, wow, I wonder if there's insurance for this kind of stuff, But it's actually one reason we're releasing our online course, because I want to be able to, A, share our love of Israeli food with people in international kitchens. And we need a source of income that is not reliant on physical tourism pretty frequently. So
I had another guest on this show who was talking about small businesses, especially females in entrepreneurship. Has it been particularly rough being a woman in business during this time?
Well, it's not, I don't have any sexism. It's just that, like, I have 2 children at home. So you have to always balance that, or 2 children in the war kitchen and stuff. So it's definitely a struggle to balance everything.
When you're sending food across the country, because it sounds like it's going as far up as the Golan, you said, and I'm assuming it's going as far down south as it needs to go.
Yeah, it's a little trickier now that it's hot.
You and I were talking that it's very important for you that the food is properly stored or cooled.
Or you're like poisoning soldiers, which is terrible. So, now that it's hot, I don't want it to go as far, but every driver gets a little pep talk about the air conditioning and bringing a jacket.
Bringing a jacket?
Yeah, because it needs to be really cold.
Are there any recipes in particular that you've really been focusing on or that have been most requested?
So in the beginning, we were doing schnitzel, and we really perfected this recipe where we marinated the chicken in coconut milk overnight. But it doesn't send as well. So we've been doing a lot of sandwiches, which are requested. So last week we did a sticky teriyaki sauce with fresh ciabatta loaves and a lemony slaw. So we really try to make sure it's really flavorful. And we get really good feedback from the soldiers,
I can imagine, because it doesn't sound like you're just sending food. You're sending really quality food.
Really quality food, of course. Yeah, that's why we tend to do it more in small batches now, to make sure it's really good.
So when you say small batches, you were doing what and now you're doing what?
Instead of 500 meals, we will do 100 or 150. Or we sent out almost 300 sandwiches last week, but we split the cooking up into 2 different days.
What's your favorite thing to send when you're sending food to soldiers or to their families or to others who need it?
I like sending food that's like really good quality. Like today we're sending out roasted chicken with like stuffed onions that we made and like beautiful like potatoes that are perfectly sauced, and just like food that's like obviously taken a lot of time, a lot of spices. People know, we care and we like put an effort. My least favorite thing is when a box is only half full or that it's food that like wasn't properly seasoned or something. Of course they can put on their own salt and such, and we try to send like lots of extra like challah and cookies and fruit. But I really want every meal to go out to be excellent because there's nothing like, if you're going to do it right. I think I said that before. Maybe that's a new quote.
I think that's what sets you apart, though, because there's a lot of initiatives to send foods to lots of different populations affected by the war, but your focus on quality is what I imagine sets you apart.
Fair, but perhaps in the beginning, really quantity was more of a need because people really just needed to eat. And now that things are more stable, people need to, have love and comfort through food.
If somebody doesn't know, why at the beginning was there such a need for food?
I mean, I feel like everybody's going to have a slightly different answer, but I was told that a lot more reservists showed up than were called. So we need to find structure to find food for them. There were a lot of displaced people that didn't have kitchens. We need to find food for them. A lot of people in trauma that they shouldn't have to cook for themselves. That's not within our tradition, right? People bring food during a shiva. So just to be able to send food to some of those sad occasions was critical.
And part of what you've developed your reputation around is that, like you said earlier, not just the food part, but also the community and the therapy and all of that. So how did you grow that side of this initiative?
So a wonderful woman named Alicia joined our team early on. And these are all volunteer people who are just like, I'm going to do this now. I'm like, fantastic. So she and another woman, Jules, who developed the social media, they started kind of promoting more of these community initiatives, finding the therapists and stuff. So I can't really take credit for that. It was really led by Alicia. Shout out. But, we really worked in tandem having meetings like every day to make sure we were providing as much support as we could. Because like at the end of the day, we were still living in our houses and our families were okay. And I guess we had some like mental resilience to be able to push forward different initiatives.
It almost sounds like having Citizens Kitchen gave you a way to channel at a time when so many of us were facing, we didn't know what was coming next and there was so much ambiguity, and you were able to channel that into a beautiful project.
Yes. I like being productive. So I was like, okay, we can use all this anxious energy. My sister was living with me because she didn't have bomb shelter. So we were waking up at 5 a.m, like making sure it happened. Because like, how else are you going to deal with trauma? I mean, actually, there's many ways. I take that back. This is the way that we dealt with trauma. Just kind of moving forward with adrenaline and getting as much stuff done as we could.
And has that continued or has that shifted in the last 9 months?
So in November, we were starting to do a bunch of different barbecues because we had such great chefs. So we were doing a barbecue and the security situation changed. It was up by Kiryat Shmona and we ended up not going to their base. We were in like some parking lot and there was like Torchanim blasts and stuff and it was dark. And so I started having like panic attack symptoms. And I was like, oh, I should probably like address this. So then I went back to yoga. Yep. And then I was like, oh, okay, like you actually need to like have a little bit of balance. So I started just doing a lot of work from home and letting other people run the kitchen a bit.
I can imagine that was probably difficult for you to let other people start running that.
Well, like I wasn't actually running the kitchen. It was my sister Shandel and the chef Alon because there was other logistics to do. And they're doing a fabulous job. So part of life is learning when to let go. So, we're lucky to have a lot of great people on the team.
And who's on the team today? How is it structured at the moment?
So right now, my sister and I, Shandel, are running the volunteering because it's much, much more structured. It's less chaotic. And then Alicia has also joined the team part-time, and we're really lucky to have her because she really pushes us out of our comfort zone in terms of marketing and such. And then we still work with Alon on different events as well. So we're really lucky to have so many good people.
So as life during war shifts and people go back to work, has that also impacted your business and this initiative that you're running?
I mean, it's changed it. So we have more volunteers from abroad. We had a group from Australia and Russia and lots from the States. We partnered with the Christian Embassy in Jerusalem, who sent a couple delegations, which was really nice. They led a prayer circle.
It almost sounds like because you're involved with food and the way that you've structured this initiative, that you are very attuned to the shifting tides of wartime.
Yeah, and a lot, I mean, you hear a lot of stories, so that can be intense about, the things people have gone through and all that. So I'm trying to be as attuned as possible to understand what kind of need there is.
And at the beginning, what were those acute needs?
Essentially, we sent to soldiers, displaced families. We were sending a lot to like elderly and Holocaust survivors, and some of these had been displaced from Ukraine and now were displaced again from, their homes in the south. And also, at one point, we were also sending to Ichilov and Tel Aviv. So,
and you yourself are an immigrant. You have an Israeli husband, but you actually chose to make Israel your home.
Yeah, from California.
Has that impacted how you've responded to the war and why you built Citizens Kitchen?
So I think I touched upon this a little bit earlier, but it was very important to me to be able to get back to my chosen home country. And I did a year in the Army, but I always felt bad I didn't do more. So it was kind of a way to serve not in uniform or a different uniform and be able to get back.
And for the volunteers that are coming to work with you, what do you think is driving them to come and volunteer?
I think people want to be able to help. I think that we are a nice place to volunteer. There's air conditioning. You don't have to lean over a lot. Picking tomatoes is wonderful, but it's hard work. And I think there's a certain sense. I mean, I joke with the volunteers from outside of Israel, but I'm not really. It's like Israel is a place that they need to come and help now because it's kind of their backup plan if things go bad in their countries, So it's really good to throw down now so it can be there for them in the future.
I feel like you've done so much for the community. Do you feel that the community is supporting you in turn?
I mean, definitely. I feel really blessed to have such a strong community that's, showing up for Shabbats and that we're really able to rely on for volunteering if we need to. We're finding now some of our volunteers are coming back to classes. And I'm hoping that, we're working with tour groups to volunteer with different tourism companies. And I hope that in better times we'll be able to do some nice Israeli cooking as well. Just kind of living by my values and helping as much as I can is enough. And if that also means that the business is supported in the future because its name is more well known, then all the better.
So what's the biggest thing that you learned from the war?
Resilience. Community strength. And that I should probably find an insurance plan for wartime. I don't know if they exist, but if they do, I'm going to find it.
Why specifically that?
There's just often conflicts and tourists stop, and I want insurance to help me. They may disagree, though. So.
The word resilience gets thrown around so much during these conversations. So for you, what does that look like?
It means having sense of purpose, having strength in community, being kind to different traumas people are going through, having compassion for people, not just people you agree with, and doing self-care. I think it's really important to be able to find what helps, helps even out your nervous system because we're all living with PTSD. So how to handle that.
So much of what you're describing really sounds like healing. Are you seeing people coming to the kitchen and healing?
I would say so. I think giving back to others is a form of healing. But I don't think we can really heal until the hostages are back. Because it's really not PTSD if it's not post.
You are based in Tel Aviv, and every part of the country has a different experience when it comes to the war.
How true.
So how has the Tel Aviv experience been, and how has it been to learn about other parts of the country through the lens of Tel Aviv?
I mean, Tel Aviv is often like the secular focus point. It's like, oh, if Tel Aviv is getting targeted, something's wrong, by the international media. But it's like really not very true, right? If any place in a sovereign state is being targeted, then something's wrong. So, I mean, a lot of times Tel Aviv can seem disconnected, but we've really seen like, Pride was canceled and there's different gestures to the fact that we're in the war and we're with the rest of the country, even though, the cafes are still open there and the economy is still moving along.
If you were to reflect back on everything that you've done over the last 9 months, if you're 50 years from now, hopefully everything's much better and calmer and peaceful. What's the biggest takeaway, or what's giving you the most pride?
When my country needed me, I was there. When my people were in pain, I, gave it my all.
There's some article, I think, where you had said that if you ever want to know what would you do in a moment of history like this, now you have your answer.
It was like a very pivotal moment, like it's two paths, choose one. And thank God, like we partnered with the World Central Kitchen for a few weeks in November, and their staff said they'd never been in a country that they had seen so much volunteerism and like helping energy like Israel. And that's a big thing to say, You've never seen a country come together like ours.
You're also a mother.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned your kids. So
great kids. Shout out to my kids.
Has being a mother impacted how you've responded to the war?
Oh, yeah. I feel like every parent in the beginning was super traumatized that other people's kids were killed or taken hostage or, affected on both sides of the borders. Like, I think it's just really traumatic for parents because you really look at your kid and be like, what if it was you? And then you just die a little inside, So, yeah, being a parent is hard because it's also, I'm an American. My kids could grow up in California on a farm in Napa Valley.
It sounds nice, but it doesn't sound like something you specifically would pursue.
Every time I'm there, I love it. That's where my dad lives. My boy begs me to come back to Israel despite the skyrockets. So, you need to make choices.
It's one of the very interesting things I find with children in Israel is that given the choice to go to most other places, they really do love being in Israel.
They really love it. And like maybe we could get them to love someplace else too if I really dug in. But no regrets about birthing and raising them here. It's been wonderful.
Where is Citizen Kitchen going from here?
Every month we've asked ourselves that because we're like, oh, no way, like the war is going to stay till January. Like, why are they writing me? Or anyway, I've given up on that whole like don't ask about 3 months from now thing because I realized that, even after the war, we still will be able to help. And I do suspect that as long as people are willing to volunteer and donate, we're still willing to put the efforts to be able to give food to people who need it. I would also like to start a few initiatives, and if anybody listening would like to fund this, please just call me, I want to host relaxing cooking workshops of released soldiers. I was talking to a tour guide who had just he was in Gaza for months. He was talking about the soldiers trying to pick up the pieces of their broken lives and, how he might want to come with his partner. And then I was like, wow, like I could probably get this sponsored. We can come for a nice, like, evening with your unit and just like, give back a little bit and show that we appreciate you. And I think there's a lot of initiatives like that, like kind of different workshops, activities, therapies to try to keep having their backs even if things do calm down. So I want to start that. And then we've also been in talks with different rehab centers to be able to do different food related activities more formally. So
there's a really big desire that you have to make an impact and give back.
I just really love the people here, everybody. I just like really appreciate, waking up and going to my favorite cafe in our studios in Florentine. And it's just all different kinds of people and people are just really kind and there's just a lot there. So it feels good to be able to be a part of something greater than myself.
Has that always been the case for you, or has that shifted since the start of the war?
I didn't really have so much of a, I mean, my parents are both rabbis, so I did grow up in a community, but really I found my own in Israel. My master's degree is in conflict resolution, and I used to want to do formal diplomacy. My desire was to do diplomacy between Israelis, Christians, Muslims, Jews. Like, if we can't get along with each other, then why are we trying to, do things with our neighbors? That being said, I realized I did not want to go into diplomacy because the pay is not very good and there's just a lot of people like stressing out. So I decided I wanted to do more food work, but like diplomacy through food is a big passion of mine. So we've started doing different cultural nights, and I'd like to continue that. I'd love to do some more formal like work around food and connection. I think that I study that anything that you do, if it's together with another person, it helps humanize them. And what's better than doing food related stuff? And I think there's a lot of opportunities given the fact that we're in South Tel Aviv and near Jaffa, and there's so many different communities there. We're across the street from this like wonderful school with a lot of like asylum seeker kids and such. So be nice.
Have you had opportunities thus far in the war to interact with those different communities?
I mean, we've had different types of people volunteering, like Eritrean and some like Christian Arabs from Jaffa and stuff, like here and there. I'd love to be able to make sure it feels like a very welcoming space for whoever wants to come in.
What's bringing them out to come volunteer?
People want to give back to the country they live on, You want to you don't wish the pilot ill of the plane you're on.
With the volunteers that are coming in, or with the people who you're sending it to, have there been any particularly moving stories or impacts?
It was so interesting. I was at a birthday party a few weeks ago, and one of the soldiers that had gotten the birthday party was of a soldier who got our food and reached out to us on Instagram. Very sweet guy. We're both from California, so now we're friends. Then another one of the women there had been a soldier who also got our food. And she was just like really moved and really wanted to express how grateful she was because they got the food on their first Shabbat in. They all are like adults with lives, and that it really meant a lot to them to be able to have yummy food for Shabbat and cookies and challah and whatever we sent. And we don't necessarily do it. We do not do it for the validation, but it's really nice to hear when it does make an impact, because then there's a purpose.
There's a lot of purpose in what you're doing, though.
I know, but we're in a bit of a, tunnel vision. So it's always be like, oh, okay, great. Like, soldiers who get the food inside Gaza, like, it matters to them.
From the various people that are coming into your kitchen and the people that you're helping and everything that you've experienced, how are you seeing Israeli society changing during this time?
I was actually talking to my husband about this. I think that it's okay to disagree on politics and ways of life, but if the ultimate goal is the success and the strengthening of the people who live here and the country and better lives for all, then I think that we can all agree on that goal, even if we have different paths. And I'm seeing some that people are realizing that needs to be the way forward.
And when we talk about a better life in Israel, what comes to mind?
Security, less divisiveness between different sects and groups, financial stability for people. I think that's a big one. Less humidity in Tel Aviv. That'd be nice.
The final question that I ask every guest is, what is giving you hope?
Giving me hope is that we have more or less a shared goal of a better future. And I hope that I don't like to say, oh, there's a silver lining to all this, because I don't think that justifies the immense amount of pain and horror that it's all been. But I do hope that we can move towards a better future, with more prosperity and security and cooperation. I know not everybody has really seen that. We see that in politics. But at least the people on the ground, I do hope that we can see, like, we have to work together. And look, we have worked together. we can do it. So that gives me hope. And, you have to just keep doing mitzvot and keep sending positive energy into the world, because only light dispels darkness. And that's a phrase that I repeat a lot. So if we can keep putting light out there and just spreading kindness, hopefully that will, spread further.
Thank you to Aliya for joining us. Thank you to Naomi Studios for hosting us. And thank you to all of you for joining us on another episode of the Homefront Podcast. If you want to support the people of Israel, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. Follow the Homefront Podcast on social media for more updates, and we'll see you in the next episode.